Why avoidance can't break the bond with you, even after leaving. Here's the truth most people never tell you about avoidant partners and the bond they walked away from. Avoidants don't actually break that bond. They distance themselves from the relationship, yes, but not from the imprint it leaves on their nervous system, their emotional memory, and their sense of self. That connection doesn't disappear just because they shut the door. It lingers quietly, resurfacing in moments of loneliness, emotional dysregulation, or when they meet someone new who doesn't feel the same. Studies from the University of California on attachment neuroscience reveal something fascinating. When avoidants form a secure connection with someone, their brain's limbic system creates what researchers call an emotional baseline. This baseline doesn't get deleted when the relationship ends. It stays encoded in the amygdala and hippocampus, influencing how they experience every connection that comes after. Most people think avoidants just move on and forget. They don't. Their bodies remember what their minds try to suppress. I work with avoidant individuals every week, and here's what they tell me months or even years after leaving meaningful relationships. One client said, "I was at dinner with someone new, and she was perfect on paper. But when she laughed, I realized I was waiting for a different sound." Another kept their ex's playlist for 2 years, never playing it, but unable to delete it. They described this strange emptiness in quiet moments, comparing new partners to someone they claimed they wanted to forget. Their nervous system stays psychologically tethered to a bond they thought they escaped. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why avoidants can't break free from certain connections, what's happening in their brain and body when they try to move on, and most importantly, how this knowledge shifts the power back to you, so you can stop waiting and start healing with complete clarity. To understand why avoidance can't break this bond, you have to understand what made it different. You didn't love lightly. You didn't attach for entertainment, validation, or ego. You attached through genuine presence. You showed up consistently, held space through their withdrawal, and responded with understanding rather than control. For an avoidant, someone whose nervous system learned early that closeness equals danger, this kind of love is profoundly destabilizing. Not because it's bad, but because it's unfamiliar. It bypasses their defenses instead of fighting them. It offers safety without demand, intimacy without invasion. Once an avoidant experiences that level of consistent emotional availability, their system records it as something rare. Avoidants survive by disconnecting from emotional intensity. They intellectualize feelings. They compartmentalize experiences. They convince themselves that what they felt wasn't that deep or that you were too much. But here's the paradox. The very reason they label the bond as overwhelming is because it reached places nothing else ever has. You reflected back their unprocessed inner world without judgment. And that's terrifying because it forces the avoidant to confront emotions they spent a lifetime suppressing: longing, grief, vulnerability, and the fear of being truly seen. This is why avoidants often leave suddenly, go cold, or rewrite the story after the relationship ends. It's not because the bond was weak. It's because it was strong in a way they couldn't control. When an avoidant pulls away, they're not breaking the bond. They're escaping themselves. They're trying to reestablish emotional equilibrium by returning to distance, independence, and numbness. But the nervous system remembers. The body remembers. Over time, something interesting happens. The avoidant meets new people. They date. They form surface-level connections that feel safe because they don't go deep. But nothing quite lands the same. Conversations feel thinner. Emotional exchanges feel transactional. There's less resonance, less warmth, less emotional consistency. And that's when the bond resurfaces. Not as longing at first, but as comparison. The avoidant may not consciously think, "I miss them," but their system thinks something's missing. They'll be on a date with someone who checks all the logical boxes and notice themselves feeling bored during conversations that should be interesting. They'll receive affection that feels performative rather than genuine. They'll experience closeness that somehow feels more distant than the silence they once shared with you. Think about it like this. You know how certain songs transport you back to a specific moment? The avoidance nervous system does the same thing with emotional safety. A new partner might say all the right words, but the feeling underneath doesn't match. And that mismatch is loud, even when everything looks perfect on the surface. This is where you become psychologically inescapable. Not because the avoidant wants you back, but because you redefine what connection felt like. Once they've experienced genuine emotional safety, they can't unknow it. You become the baseline, even in absence. Every new person gets measured against the standard the avoidant doesn't even realize they're using. Another reason avoidants can't break this bond is because you didn't chase power. You offered regulation. During a relationship, you often served as an emotional stabilizer. You soothed their anxiety, grounded their nervous system, and absorbed emotional tension without retaliation. For an avoidant, this creates a subtle form of emotional dependency they don't consciously acknowledge. When an avoidant was stressed, overwhelmed, or emotionally activated, your presence calmed their system down. You didn't demand they open up. You didn't punish them for shutting down. You just existed as a steady, safe presence that their nervous system could lean on without feeling trapped. And once it's gone, they feel it, especially during stress, failure, or moments when their usual coping strategies stop working. This is why avoidants often resurface months or even years later, not necessarily to reconcile, but to check if you still exist in the same way. They may send a casual message at 2 a.m., a nostalgic comment on an old photo, or a vague apology, not because they've healed, but because something inside them remembers where safety once lived. But here's the part most people misunderstand. The bond isn't sustained by contact. It's sustained by contrast. The more you heal, grow, and reclaim your energy, the stronger the imprint becomes in the avoidant's mind. Why? Because you no longer feel emotionally available in the same way. The absence becomes final, not as abandonment, but as completion. Avoidants struggle deeply with finality when it comes to meaningful emotional bonds. Distance feels safe. Closure does not. When you genuinely move on, when your energy shifts from waiting to living, something changes in how they experience the loss. You represent a version of connection the avoidant both craves and fears. Someone who saw them clearly without trying to change them. Someone who offered love without leverage. Someone who stayed present through emotional withdrawal until they didn't anymore. That loss hits differently. It shows up as restlessness, as dissatisfaction, as a persistent sense that something meaningful slipped through their fingers. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Avoidants often realize the depth of the bond only when it's no longer accessible. Not because they didn't care, but because their emotional processing is delayed. While you grieved, reflected, and healed in real time, the avoidant suppressed, distracted, and moved on until the emotional bill comes due. And when it does, you're no longer there to soften the impact, what you felt immediately after the breakup. They might not feel until 6 months, a year, or even longer. By the time they process what they lost, you've already done your healing work. You've already moved forward. This doesn't mean the avoidant will return transformed or ready. It means the bond becomes a psychological landmark, a quiet reminder of what was possible and what they ran from. You become the relationship they compare all others to, even if they never admit it out loud. For you, this is where power shifts. Not through revenge, not through silence used as punishment, but through genuine detachment. When you stop seeking validation, stop waiting to be chosen, and stop centering the avoidant in your emotional world, the bond completes its purpose. It turns from a wound into wisdom. And ironically, that's when the avoidant feels it most, not as longing, but as respect. Because avoidants don't attach to need, they attach to autonomy. And when you become whole again, no longer trying to rescue, explain, or hold space, the dynamic changes permanently. So here's what I want you to do. Take a moment today and write down one thing you learned about yourself through this connection. Not about them, about you, your capacity, your depth, your resilience. That's what you take forward. This isn't about hoping the avoidant realizes what they lost. It's about realizing what you were carrying and choosing not to carry it anymore. The bond mattered. It was real, but it wasn't meant to trap you in waiting or self-doubt. It was meant to wake you up to your depth, your intuition, and your capacity to love without losing yourself. If an avoidant can't face that bond, it doesn't diminish it. It proves how powerful it was. So let them remember in silence if they must.